Hey, welcome everybody back to the Modern Farming Podcast, where we bring you insights directly from the field about farming, agriculture, and the incredible environment we live in. Last week, Brad and I told you that we were doing a three-part series. I guess 2 weeks ago now, we launched our three-part series of Dirt to Dinner, or Dirt to Table. And yesterday, or last week, we had an unbelievable guest. John Lundgren just has been through the ringer and been through it all. And that was really great insight that we had. And we were really excited to bring you, John, as we are today, to bring you Will Harris of White Oak Pastures. We are so extremely excited to have you on, Will. Thanks for being with us. And, we've all seen you. I know you and Brad are good friends, and we've seen a lot of what you do, and just couldn't be more excited to have you on and kind of share your story with our listeners as well. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So if you could, Brad and I kind of know what you do, but if you could maybe give us your kind of introduction to White Oak Pastures.
Good. So White Oak Pastures is our family farm in Bluffton, Georgia. Started by my great-grandfather in 1866. Followed by his son, my grandfather, followed by his son, my dad, followed by me. I have two adult daughters and their spouses and their babies that live here and work here on the farm today. The farm today is operated as what we think of as a regenerative farm. We raise 5 red meat species: cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits. Raise 5 poultry species: chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, and ducks. We have an organic vegetable garden. We have eggs. We have a restaurant and lodging and a store. And it's really when I changed the way I farm, I was a very industrial cattleman. I was really focused on the land and the animals. That was what drove me to farm in a more non-industrial way. But along the way, the little town of Bluffton, which I'm sitting right in the middle of Bluffton right now in my office, the town started to respond. It had done nothing except atrophy and die off in my lifetime. And suddenly it had a breath of fresh air. And we've got about 170 employees, and most of them live in and around Bluffton. And it's just been miraculous what it's done for the little town. It's gone from being a ghost town to being a very pleasant place.
Yeah, and I know that can't be a very easy process, Will. I mean, the system that you're doing is not cheap. It's not easy, and I know you went into a lot of debt from a industrial farm that was doing good and making money to some hard times and now doing well today.
Well, I really enjoyed the trip. It's been a lot of fun. It is still a lot of fun having my 2 of my daughters come back. They probably would not have come back to the farm had I not changed. It's certainly very, very rewarding. It is as you lifted up, it's a high risk, low reward business. So one must be careful economically, financially, but it's working for us. It's certainly not a get rich quick dream, but it's very rewarding. And I speak for myself when I say I couldn't be happier, but I think I speak for many of the others as well.
Yeah. Well, could we go into a little bit about, what you do? I mean, how are you grazing these animals? They're all together, they're apart.
So this home farm where I'm sitting today is 3,200 acres. And in addition to that, we graze a little over 2,000 acres at solar voltaic arrays that are near here. We can talk more about that later. But this farm is where we run all those species I listed for you. The farm, the 3,200 acres is divided up into about 150, 30-ish acre pastures, paddocks we call them. And every paddock's got a certain amount of shade and water available to it. And we move the animals every day. They march up one side of the pasture and down farm and down the other. It's about 60 days rotation between grazings. In other words, we graze one day and the pasture rests for about 60 days. Probably be better if it was 70 or 80, but it's 60. And that's the way we raise our cattle. The other species are a little bit different. For a long time, I tried to follow cows with sheep, with goats, with hogs, with poultry, and then they move at different speeds, and that's just not very labor efficient. So we move the cattle in the amount that I described, and the other animals are moved on a very, very regular basis, but it's more on a as needed, and it's where they need to go. Certain areas need to be grazed by goats. There's woody species growing out there, and this needs goat browse. Some areas need to be grazed by sheep. Some areas need to have hog exposure rooting around. So we do that. That's purely just management, ongoing daily decisions.
Really fascinating.
And that's all hard fences. That's not electric on the cattle. You built hard 30-acre paddocks.
No, they're permanent. They're permanent electric fences. The perimeter of the farm is in 1240 woven stock wire, and then the cross fences are permanent, but they are electric. 3 or 4 strands of high tensile electric wire.
Wow. So how many total acres? You said you had 5 species of red meat. How many total acres is that on?
Well, it's a little over 5,000 acres.
Wow. And every bit of the farm has been converted into a more natural, more regenerative type system.
Yeah, 25 years ago, I was a very, very industrial farmer. A lot of chemical fertilizer, a lot of pesticides, a lot of tillage, and we just changed the way we farmed and did it fairly abruptly. We've been learning more and more about it, trying to do it better and better every year. But the initial decision to change the way we farm was fairly abrupt.
What drove that decision? Was there something that happened, financially, or did you see another market, or what was the driver there?
Well, financially, we were doing okay. Financially, we certainly weren't rich people, but we paid taxes every year. It was a profitable operation. We had a lot of equity. We didn't know any money, and we've been doing it a long time, so we were reasonably good at it. So it was not an economic decision. What it was just a sort of a disgust with the excesses of that management system. And we had a lot of confinement, a lot of antibiotics and growth hormones in the cattle, a lot of tillage and chemical fertilizer and pesticides on the land, and a realization that where I didn't do that, it was better, and then began to more accurately emulate that less scientific approach.
Yeah. So when you didn't do that, it was better. How did you quantify that? Was it something you saw in the actual product, like in the meat, or was it a behavior of the animal, or was it just something you knew that was the better way to do it?
Well, it wasn't. It certainly wasn't the meat at first. The meat is different now, but that took a while. The allowing the animals to express instinctive behavior was an early decision. Cows are meant to roam and graze. Hogs are meant to root and wallow. Poultry is meant to scratch and peck. And in the confinement system, that those instinctive behaviors are just not available to those animals. And I think that causes a low level of stress that is just problematic in many ways. So I did the best I could to give the animals a bit more natural habitat to live in. In other words, I didn't feed them in a feedlot anymore with them wading around in mud or choking on dust. The land, I noticed the difference in the land that I tilled and fertilized and used pesticides on versus the land in the edge of the woods. And it's just very different. One was a dead mineral medium. The other one was teeming with life. And I thought teeming with life is better. So I ceased to use those tools those technologies that I thought was causing that. And it's very slow. You don't make these improvements overnight. It takes a long time, painfully amount of time.
Yeah.
But it does happen, and when it happens, it's a great experience.
Yeah, and we talk about it a lot on the Modern Farming podcast here. We didn't get to this point overnight either. It's difficult to change, but it took us 200 plus years of heavy tillage, heavy chemical usage, your sort of quote unquote factory farm type thing, where it took a long time for us to degrade our soils to the point we are today. And, I think for a lot of our listeners, we do have a lot of growers and ranchers and farmers here, but for a lot of our listeners, we're still learning about this process. So I wanted to go back to something you said earlier is the meat changed and it took a while to change. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Was it a change in flavor? Was it a change in the way you process the meat or the longevity of the animal? What was that?
I think the physiology of the animal probably is more than anything else. My cattle herd genetically goes back to the cows my great granddaddy brought here 160 years ago. My great grandfather saved his own heifers, saved his own bulls, and it was a closed herd, and that's how he raised cattle. And my grandfather started buying purebred Hereford or Angus or whatever was vogue at the time. I think we started importing breed stock in the 1800s. And my dad always bought purebred bulls, and it was kind of you never knew what kind was going. I mean, it's flavor of the month club as far as breeds. You go to the bull sale, see something you never seen before, and buy 3 of them. And I did the same thing. So we mongrelized the herd badly. He went back all the way to the 100 and something years, but on the female side, on the male side, we mongrelized it, and it looked mongrelized. But we also did what we did with cattle is we grew them taller and taller and taller. And you go back and look at cattle champions in the early 1900s versus what we have today. They don't look like the same species. And when I started saving my own bulls, breeding my own cows, I selected for a different kind of animal. I wanted them shorter, thicker, more meat, less leg. And I've been doing that now for probably 15, 17 years. And it's changed the phenotype pretty significantly. And I think it's for the better. Those feedlot cattle, bred to be feedlot cattle that I was raising, it's hard for them to make it on grass. They just need so much more nutrition. It's like if you took a 6'9" guy that's athlete weighing 400 pounds, a wrestler, a runner, or whatever he is, it's hard for him to make it on a sandwich.
Yeah, I suppose they'd be starving, right? I mean, that would just fall apart. But so have you noticed for one, there's a whole market. You said you folks have a restaurant, and are are people coming to the restaurant looking for that regenerative type beef, or are they coming to the farm because you're kind of a local farm and they may have heard some good things about it? Is it the customer looking for that type of beef? And how educated is that customer?
I would say it's a growing. The people that are receptive to this kind of change in diet is growing, but it's still a fairly small number. I don't know the numbers, but it's a small percentage of the population. We sell about all I want to sell. This company is about as big as me and my family want it to be. We've had the discussion and decided that if we're going to grow much, we're going to have to hire a CEO to run it, and we just don't want to do that. We're farmers. But my hope was that I would sell all of my farm production, Georgia, Florida, Alabama. And we're selling in 48 states. I don't want to. I need to sell this amount of product. I built a red meat slaughter plant and a poultry slaughter plant and an order fulfillment center. We built a lot of stuff. So I've got to sell a certain amount of product to make it work. But I'm sorely disappointed that I'm having to ship it as far as I am. And it's okay. I mean, it's all right. But I wanted to be part of helping other growers make this transition. And I feel like I'm part of keeping them from making this transition because I'm inadvertently competing with them. I'm not choosing to compete with them, but we put the product, our available product, on our website, and people order it, and they order it from 48 states.
Is there a group of ranchers that reach out to you to look for some guidance? I mean, I suppose there's a network of individuals that are looking to do the same thing that you have. Are people reaching out to you and kind of figuring out, hey, Will, how'd you pull this off?
Yeah, there are a number. There's been a good bit of that. Now, I'm not overwhelmed by it. There's been a good bit of it. And we actually formed a nonprofit, a 501c3. Hired a really sharp guy to be the executive director, and he puts on schools and such as that, 3-4 day schools. Yeah, y'all came to one. Y'all been to them before, hadn't you? Right?
Yeah. I came up when Spencer Smith was there, and I'm hoping you can bring him back.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was a good 3 day.
And then so we do those, and we also separately. We have an intern program. We bring in 6 interns per quarter, 4 times a year for 3 months, and we only accommodate 6, and we'll get 20 or 30 applications for those 6 slots. So we're able to really sift through them and get really good people. So we really want to be part of helping educate and promote not just White Oak Pastures, but the whole sustainable regenerative movement in general.
Yeah, why is it so important? I mean, like I said, we've got a lot of consumer type individuals that aren't necessarily part of the ag complex, if you will. Why is it so important? What is the value from someone who produces this type of animal or food? What is the true value to the consumer?
Well, I don't get into the details of it because it's not my area of expertise. And I think we farmers sound kind of silly when we start talking about something we don't know about. But I do believe there is a health benefit. I do believe there's a food safety benefit. I know there is an ecological benefit. I know there's an animal welfare benefit. I know there is I call it the rural revival, bringing these little agrarian towns back from being a ghost town, on the verge of being a ghost town. You know, there are a number of different ways in which the industrialization, commoditization, centralization of our food system has not treated us well as a society. And I think that what we do here flies in the face of that. It's a way of not participating in that program. As I said, we actually sell about all I want to sell. We're not out trying to get a lot of new customers, but I am disappointed that I have to ship it as far as I do. You know, I really wish that. I mean, I don't want to be competing with people in New England or the Pacific Northwest or the grain belt. I want those people to be. I want to be a local provider, and local can't be Bluffton, Georgia, but local can be Georgia, Florida, Alabama.
Are other farms, other ranchers, do they struggle to market the products, or I mean, because these, you know, we talk to people every week all over the country, and this exists. I know it's a smaller number of ranchers, but we certainly have access to it. Do you think that some of these other ranchers just aren't marketing to the extent, or why are you so much more popular and just maybe been doing it longer?
You know, when we have a lot of people that come here expressing interest in farming this way, we talk to them about it a lot. And one point I try to drive home is there are three legs on the stool. There's production out in the pasture, and that's what everybody's excited about. That's what everybody wants to talk about, and that's important. But there's also processing. You know, you can do the best job in the world raising the animal properly. If you can't get it processed well and cost effectively and timely, then it's an exercise in futility. And the third leg is marketing. You've got to monetize it, and you've got to get more for it than industrial beef, the price for industrial beef, because you've got more cost in it. So I think the message that we want to drive home is the fact that you want to run your farm in a regenerative manner is not enough. That's step one. You got to be able to make your product monetizable, and you got to monetize it.
Yeah. And that was the big risk you took back in 10, 15 years ago to build the slaughterhouses.
Yeah, I built my slaughterhouse about 15, 20 years ago, 15 probably. And I didn't want a slaughterhouse that day, and I don't want one today. But I had to do it. I was committed to transitioning the farm. I was using outside slaughter capacity, and it wasn't adequate. I couldn't get enough done well. So I with a lot of objection, built the processing plants. Didn't want to then, don't want it now. And I even today, I recommend people, if they cannot build a processing plant, let somebody else do that. I mean, it's not a bad business, but it's just very difficult. We got 170 employees. You know, that's more than I ever expected to have. My payroll is $100,000 every single Friday.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. We talk a lot. Obviously, this podcast, you know, is about modern farming, but we've really been honing in on, you know, the nutrition of food. And I know you don't get into the actual, you know, protein amounts of everything, but do you think, and I know the answer to this, but I want our listeners to hear it from you, so it's not just from Brad and I, but do you think the marketing arm of all the other foodstuffs on the store shelf is actively working against what you're all trying to do? Is that something that's kind of slowing down the adoption, or is it still just the lack of availability of regeneratively grown cattle?
No. It's just much deeper than just availability. You know, the modern food system that feeds us today actually started after World War II. Prior to that, there were a lot of little food companies and a lot of little markets and a lot of little processors, and it's a very different way of doing business. And you know, today you see the statistics just like I do. 80-something% of the beef comes from 4 suppliers, and of course the supermarket industry grew up with that industrial meat industry. And then cereal would be the same way. You know, so all these foods. You know, when I first went in the grass-fed beef business in the late 90s, early 2000s, my first customers was Whole Foods Market, and then later Publix, and then later several other big grocers. And they did business with me because in the early 2000s, there wasn't much grass-fed beef. People were talking about it, but not many people were raising much of it. We were raising a good bit of it compared to the others. So I was successful in getting in those stores. So I sold Whole Foods Market and Publix the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. And they were glad to get it because it wasn't out there, and I was glad to sell it because I had it and I needed to monetize it. By the time Whole Foods Market changed hands a few years ago, the relationship was strained badly. And by the time when they sold, it was really Amazon was really bad. And the reason, it's not because they're bad people, it's not because they're evil and wanted to hurt Will. That wasn't true. The fact is, I didn't fit in. You know, they needed to be able to call somebody somewhere and arrange to have a truck with 50,000 pounds of middle meats delivered every Tuesday to 7 different warehouses. And they weren't going to ever get that out of Will Harris and White Oak Pastures. And it wasn't that they were mad at me, wanted to hurt me, or malicious. It just didn't fit. We're bigger than most beef producers of that size, family beef producers. We weren't nearly big enough to do business the way they were geared to doing business. So the marketing side of it is difficult.
Will, how much today are you doing online straight out of the farm versus what's going to, I know your ground beef is still in Publix, at least in Central Florida.
Publix has stuck with us. Publix, they're just wonderful people. It's not convenient to buy grass-fed beef from White Oak Pastures, but they do it, and I'm grateful for that. So we sold 30, the best year we ever had last year, biggest year. We sold $30 million worth of product, and over half of it was direct to consumer, and less than half of it was wholesale, grocery, and food service. And I think those numbers will continue to diverge.
Well, I know with the amount of employees you have and a $100,000 payroll check going out every Friday, you're not doing this to make a bunch of money, because I don't think you're getting rich. I think you're making a living.
We're making a living. We actually lost money a couple of years here a while back. Country of origin labeling changed the rules on that, and meat companies were able to bring, or are able to bring in grass-fed beef from 20-something countries, but label it product of the USA because they add value here. The cows were born, raised, and slaughtered in Australia, New Zealand, Uruguay, wherever, but they can legally label it product of the USA. And when that happened, we lost money a couple of years.
Right.
Yeah. Probably would still be losing money had we not embraced that direct to consumer online sales business.
Right. Yeah. Well, I always love to hear you talk about the farm and what's going on when you dig into some of, you know, how you're feeding the animals, what your cover cropping programs and you know, hay bombing in the wintertime and all the fun stuff is what I like you to dig into. So I mean, even talk about the circles of nature a little bit.
Yeah, so we're about, I guess, about 80 miles from the Gulf of Mexico in Georgia. Florida's right over there. Alabama's right over there. And we can grow warm season perennial grasses and forbs really well. We do good with that. We do not grow perennial cool season grasses and forages very well. It was too hot for fescue and some of those others. So we figured out a few years ago that we still in cool season annuals in our warm season perennials. And if we do it just right, it works. We spent about $200,000 planting a cereal. This year was rye. It could be wheat, oats. I don't care. I have a new blue heeler puppy, if you heard him.
Hey.
We drill in the John Deere 1590 no-till drill, 20-foot drill. We drill in cereal, ryegrass, dicot radish, and clover every year. At least that. And for something else cheap at the seed store, I might pull it in there too. We run over this whole farm. Timing's important. We need to do that in October. I don't need to start much before the first day of October. I need to be pretty well finished by the end of October. That's the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And we get if we're lucky, we're able to graze that by January the 1st. Sometimes a little later, sometimes a little earlier. And we rotate through it just like we do this warm season perennials in 150 paddocks. And we got to be real careful this time of year to not let it get too big. If we let it get too big, it'll overshadow the warm season perennials, and that would be devastating. I think I told you we spent about $200,000 overseeding that, yeah. And but we don't get that much out of it. But it comes at a time when I desperately need it. We still feed some hay, and but I feed a lot less than I would if I didn't have that cool season annual program going.
But only a couple of months. You're not having to feed hay for 4 or 5 months like the average cattle rancher.
Oh no, a couple of months is about all. We usually it's November and May are the 2 months we feed most of the hay. That's when we're waiting on the cool season stuff to get up, and then we're waiting on the warm season stuff to get up. October and May are our 2 driest months. We're not like y'all in Florida. We get 50 2 or 3 inches of rain on the average here, and it comes fairly even throughout the year except for May and October. Those are dry months for us.
Right.
The summers seem drier than the winters, but it's just because evapotranspiration is so much greater in the summer.
If you would, we'll touch on, as you're talking about the land, when you are able to purchase a piece of land and it's poor land, how do you start the process? How do you get the system going?
Well, when I buy a new piece of land or lease a new piece of land, during that window that we're feeding hay, I try to have the cattle on it during that window. And you mentioned the word, I call it hay bombing. And I've got hay trailers I feed hay on when I'm trying to save my hay. But when I'm hay bombing, I put the hay on the ground. I let them waste a lot of it. They eat a lot of feces, a lot of urine, a lot of hay, those cloven hooves pushing into the ground. I don't feed the same place twice. I move it around, and it really makes the land look bad for that window. The next spring, I'll plant it in a mixture of warm season annuals, and I'll put some hair grass in it. And then the next year, I'll probably just plant hair grass. And it brings on. It takes about 3 years to get it going good, maybe 4, probably 3. But it's a really good way of converting this destroyed row crop land. Here, the primary crops here are corn, cotton, and peanuts, planted as monocultures in a rotation, 3-year rotation. And it really is just hard on the land. There's a tremendous amount of tillage, a tremendous amount of herbicide, insecticide, pesticide put out. Hard on the land. These pieces of land that I acquire, either buy or lease, will be down to about 0.5% organic matter. On top of that, there's a lot of pesticide residue in the land. There's 0.5% organic matter. And this land on my home farm that's been managed well for over 20 years is about 5.5% organic matter, 11x. And that is such a organic matter is not all that matters. It's just one. It's just
Right.
one thing you look at. But I know you know this, but if you got land that's 1% organic matter, hold about 1 inch of rain generally. So that land that's 0.5% organic matter that I acquire, it's not going to absorb a 1/2 inch of rain. I don't care if it rains 6 inches. It's just going to absorb a 1/2 inch. The rest of it runs off, does damage. When you get it up to 5.5% organic matter, if the rain comes slow, it'll absorb almost a 6 inch rain if it comes slowly. So it's just all the difference in the world. Of course, you see other indicators of health. You see a lot of different species of plants showing up that you didn't plant. This is from the seed bank. It's just coming out. It's just electing to germinate and grow. See a lot of earthworms. See, there's a lot going on. I don't think I can get my land much over 5.5% organic matter. I've tried real hard. But, I'm building organic matter, but organic matter is also cycling, into free carbon dioxide or whatever, microbial consumption of it. So, but 5.5 is pretty good.
No, and I know there's been soil scientists, quote unquote, experts that I've heard more than one say it takes a century or longer to build from 0.5% to 5%. That it's not possible.
They're wrong about that. It depends on what you're doing. If you're not intensively working on it, it won't ever happen. I took the soils. I was an animal science major at the University of Georgia about 100 years ago, but I took all the 3 soils classes that were available. I took them to non-soils majors. And the instructor was a PhD from Indonesia, and Dr. Kim Hai Tan. And I can still remember him saying, "You cannot build organic matter in the coastal plain soil." And we wrote it down. I mean, I took it as the word of God. But you can't. You can't do it. You can't do it if you're putting out chemical fertilizer and running tillage equipment.
Right. Yeah, we were told just to deplete it as slowly as possible is what we were told.
So what?
Deplete it as slowly as possible. Burn it off as slowly as you can. That's what I was taught.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
But then I had college professors too, as we were learning about herbicides, that would say, okay, this is the way citrus is going, but you need to be growing cover crops in your citrus groves. We've done it this way for hundreds of years, and you see where citrus is today.
Yeah, yeah.
What road would you want to go down, Will? You want to talk about some? I mean, I got up early this morning and reread your Cycles of Nature chapter in your book, and that's my favorite chapter. And
well, that's something I very strongly believe is I think that that what we do in monoculture farming, just growing one thing out there. I mentioned we grow corn, cotton, peanuts. Just so linear and so against nature. Nature's meant to be cyclical, and that's just uber linear. And it's been really a challenge for me to figure it out and to exercise it, but learning about the carbon cycle and the water cycle and the mineral cycle and the microbial cycle and the grazing cycle and all of these cycles, that if they're operating optimally, my job is to make them operate as optimally as I can. And if they operate optimally, they will provide an abundance. Right. That abundance is what I market to make my living. I think about all that oil and coal and gas that we've been digging and pumping out of the ground in the last 80 years. That is the abundance of nature from the era of the dinosaur. When the cycles of nature were operating optimally and just building up all that supply of energy, and we're still living on it this much longer.
Yep. Like you said, you think about the size of that animal, and what he was as a vegetarian and was able to grow to that size. That tells it right there.
Yeah, I read that I can't remember Argentinosaurus or something like that. Well, it was the biggest dinosaur that they believe existed, big as 2 or 3 elephants, and it was a vegetarian. Now, can you imagine a creature as big as 2 or 3 elephants living on vegetation? That must have been some mighty good vegetation.
Yeah.
A horse, they said his head wasn't much bigger than a horse. I mean, that was some good stuff he was eating.
Yeah. It was nutrient dense for sure.
Nutrient dense. Well, and my grass doesn't get nearly as big and lush as it used to when I was putting out 120 pounds a end.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it does them better. They don't have full diarrhea, running through them,
right?
And herd health. I hadn't had a veterinarian on this. I got a consulting veterinarian, a guy that I talked to about problems. I hadn't had a veterinarian on this place treating an animal in decades. We can pull a calf or whatnot, but we just don't have the health issues we used to have.
Right. And I know you're not bringing any outside genetics. You're doing everything in-house, in line.
I've been a closed herd for about 12, 15 years.
Right.
I always saved heifers, but I save bulls now. And you wouldn't want to buy one of my cows and enter in the cow show. That's not going to work well. But I love what it's done to my herd genetically. They're shorter, thicker. They look good on grass. They shine like new money.
Mm-hmm. And you're also no castration, I think, right?
I quit castrating.
Right.
Whole Foods, when I did business with them, had that program that you'd be a step 5 if you didn't do any physical alterations. So I quit. I decided to just take a calf crop. I had about 700 and something calves, that's bulls and heifers, and not castrate them. I separated them, and I didn't have much trouble with the bulls. And of course, I did not get a premium from a beef like I thought I was,
right?
But it showed me I could close my herd on the paternal side, and I did, and I really like that.
Yeah, with no castration, and that's that's zero death from. I know you probably didn't have that many issues anyhow back when you were, but
well, you can lose if you
1 or 2% is a lot.
Yeah, you castrate 300 or 400 bull calves, which we did, and you lose 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
We started composting. We slaughter 20-something cows a day, and a similar number of hogs or sheep or goats or poultry, whatever we slaughter. But we generate about 9 tons of packing plant waste. That'd be eviscerate, gut fill, non-marketable bones, skulls, whatever, feet. And we compost it with peanut shells. I get peanut shells for free. And I got a guy that manages that business for us. He's gotten really good at it. It's kind of an art. And he mixes it. I mix it with a front end loader. I don't have one of those turners, but it works well. And then we let it sit for a year. And let it sit for a year, it becomes less bacterial and more fungal.
Mm-hmm.
So we got about 6,000-7,000 tons on hand, aging. And then we spread it on the pastures. I can't legally sell it. I don't have a license, but I can legally do it and use it. And it is wonderful for the pastures. It's just great.
Yeah, but that's almost a game changer. Does it in a year's time, is there enough biology working to consume all of the bones or part of the bone?
No. Those big bones are still there. Now they're
still
very
there.
porous, and they won't flatten your tires when you run over them. If you spread compost like I make at 6 to 8 weeks, you'll be fixing flat tires. If you let it sit for a year or so, it becomes porous enough that the bones shatter when you run over them.
And you use very minimal inputs from outside other than say cover crop seed. You're not doing any fertility. You're not, you don't do soil testing. Really no need to.
Just recreationally. Yeah. We don't have a regular program. We just every now and then I'll take a soil sample, and it's not much of a surprise. It's not part of the program. We just do it sometimes.
Yeah.
We buy minerals. I do buy minerals, and I don't buy a mixed mineral. I buy individual calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, whatever. And I made mineral feeders out of old cotton wagons. I take 30-gallon drums and put them at an angle, and when the cow can put his head in there, her head in there, and I think I've heard people say that's not cost effective, and it may not be, but I think it is. I noticed some seasons they'll hammer the calcium and not eat,
right.
And then other seasons they'll hammer something else. And when they're lactating or gestating or breeding or whatever you're doing, it just makes sense that the mineral needs would change.
Certainly.
And we give them the ability to select what they want. From a cost perspective, it doesn't save me any money, but it doesn't cost any more. A little more trouble, a little more labor in it, but it's all right.
But it's separated. It's there. If they need it, they know they need it. It's not because you're lacking to give them something. The buffet is open for whatever nutrient they need, which
it just doesn't make sense. So you're going to have a good mineral mix that's good for any cow, any day. That just doesn't make much sense to me.
Right. Well, Will, I appreciate you coming on today. I kind of wanted you to define what wealth meant to you, because I know it's a lot more than money. You got your 2 daughters working on the farm. You've essentially rebuilt a city. You're pretty humble, and you don't like to say that, but a town that went from a ghost town to now is a pretty busy little town as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's certainly a pleasant little town, and I really feel blessed. I think that I'm just so grateful. This opportunity happened on my watch.
Right.
My daddy, granddaddy, great granddaddy farmers land just like me, and they didn't have this opportunity. And had they not accumulated the abundance, and I wouldn't have been able to do it. But on my watch, it became an opportunity, coincidentally.
That's a wonderful thing. Well, Will, I appreciate you coming on today. I do want to give you a plug for your book. It's probably the only book in my life I ever picked up and didn't put down other than to go to sleep.
Well,
I'm
you won't
forced to do it. you know, I've been in the cabin that you and your wife lived in as an old house when you got married, and stayed on the Gator Pond when I was visiting. And so I'm partial, but I haven't talked to anybody yet that I've recommended to that read it that didn't agree with me. So,
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your support. I promise you won't have to worry about a volume 2. There won't be one.
I think it's all in here pretty much.
Yeah, I'm done. I got to live another 70 years if I'm all right.
Yeah. And the last thing, and this is just more of us talking, but if you could get Spencer back for another 2 or 3 day workshop, I could fill that courthouse up with cattle ranchers.
If I can, I'm sorry, my dog was making. If I can do what now?
I said, if you could get Will Spencer back for a couple of days, I said, I'll fill your courthouse up with cattle ranchers.
Spencer Smith.
Mr. Smith, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I'll try to do that. He's a dear friend of mine. He came to see me a few weeks ago. Well, I guess a couple months ago now.
No, he was great. I go on your website a lot to see if he's coming back, but give me a heads up if you get him lined up, and I've already talked to some guys that was very inspiring workshop.
I sure will. And I'll tell him you said that. That'll make him feel good.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with that, Will, and I do appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me. I look forward to your next visit.
Take care, Will.